Welcome to Mirage. This is Bryan Aiello. Today, I've got Marcus Anderson joining me again, and we're going to be talking specifically about Joel Christian Gill, who writes historical narratives. Right? I mean, that's an area of speculative fiction.
Strange Fruit.
Yeah, Strange Fruit, Volume 1. I love the title of it, Uncelebrated Narratives from Black History. Well, I love uncelebrated narratives because that's pretty much what it is, huh?
Sure, yeah. Like I think I have my list from last time. I think I had we talked about Persepolis and Mouse, and then we didn't quite get to. Did we talk about ghost stories?
It sounds familiar, but I don't think we talked about it. No, we talked about I read it actually, man. I really enjoyed the hell out of it too.
Oh, which one? Ghost
Cowboy
Stories?
Wally.
Oh, Cowboy Wally. That's right. Yeah. And I think we talked about Persepolis a little bit, right?
We did talk about Persepolis. I think that ended up being like near the end of the conversation.
Right.
We got to like an hour and 30 minutes, and they can get long, man, especially when you're into it.
Yeah.
So let's see. His name is
Joel Christian Gill. Yeah, definitely.
But you know, it's really curious. He called his first book, and this is what drew my attention immediately when I looked at it, Uncelebrated Narratives. What does that mean to you? Uncelebrated Narratives.
I think it's well, yeah. I mean, the full title is Uncelebrated Narratives from Black History, and I think that you know, it's when you think about it, in history class, right, in school, you know, there's the people who they always hit on, you know, who are great, you know, in their own right. Like you got Martin Luther King. They'll talk about Rosa Parks, but like Black history, and then even when you go beyond the classroom, like there's still only goes so far a lot of times. But like, you know, Joel Christian Gill, what I love about this book is he really took time to tell some stories of some figures who have incredible stories, like things that you could make a movie about. And if you really unpacked it, and like he managed to tell these stories, and these are people who oftentimes you may not have heard of, but they're true stories, and they're really interesting and inspiring.
I think one of the descriptions said something along the lines of like a scavenger hunt through history to find some of these stories.
Yeah.
I mean, they're that buried. Can you give an example of some people that he's actually talking about or writing about in these books? I mean, these are graphic novels too, by the way. I don't think we mentioned that. He writes and draws his own book.
Yeah, he writes and draws. I think, well, I mean, two people. Well, one person. The book opens right up with the story of Henry Box Brown, who, you know, he has a really interesting story in that, you know, this is during the era of slavery, and he found a really interesting path to freedom in that, like, you know, he's called Henry Box Brown because he actually had himself mailed in a box.
Oh my God.
And he was like in there for like, you know, for a ridiculous period of time and everything. And, you know, he obviously went to great lengths to be free, because it was, you know, slavery was no joke, to say the least. And, you know, people would do whatever they had to be free if the opportunity presented itself. But just the fact that he did it and he pulled it off, like, and it worked,
and survived.
Yeah.
I mean,
and I
too.
Yeah,
nailing yourself.
Yeah. And what I love, you know, I think this story is the perfect example of, you know, what's great about Joel Christian Gill as a cartoonist, in that he, even though this is a serious story, and, you know, slavery is obviously terrible, like he finds a way to tell this true story and have respect for Henry Box Brown and the other characters. But there's also some humor in his cartooning style, which I think is kind of necessary, because subject matter wise, when you're dealing with slavery, it can be very heavy, you know. And
yeah, slavery is terrible. I mean, obviously. I mean, what? Tell me a little bit about Jamaica's history with slavery.
Well, Jamaica gained independence much later. You know, and they were
from the
under
United Kingdom, right? I mean, they're still under the United Kingdom, actually, right? You still do the Queen of England on your coin, isn't she the head of state of Jamaica, or is that done with?
I believe she may be, but I know like the influence of the United Kingdom is all over. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
my mom used to tell me about in home ec class, a lot of the dishes they would learn to cook are, were very, very British. That being said, like, Jamaica as a nation, like we have our own cuisine, which, thankfully, like you can find in a lot of cities in the United States.
Mhm.
That's very, separate from the British. But it's interesting that in that formal school environment, they had the British style of cooking. So, but yeah. I mean, obviously colonialism, uh
It's
it's
devastating.
yeah, and it's really truly left its mark. But in this story though, like I just I don't know.
But as far as Jamaica's concerned, you guys didn't
Yeah,
revolt. Haiti revolted. They
right,
had the horrible, horrible revolts and deaths and pulled France out of there
yeah, and
violently. But
and not
Jamaica
only
didn't.
right, yeah,
You
Jamaica did
guys
not.
lost slavery when England lost slavery. They said it's
Yes,
illegal here. That was way before America. They did it non-violently.
right,
And I mean, obviously, they had slavery. They can't ever get forgiven for that. But they didn't do what America did, which was
yeah, go to war.
really. I mean, yeah, that was horrible. What happened in this country? And
Yeah. Haiti was the only enslaved nation where there was a successful revolt, and it's super messed up in that they've been made to pay for years for just for the price of freeing themselves.
yeah,
So
very true.
it's
It's a
like
very poor country, isn't it? They've had to take care of themselves the entire time.
yeah.
The entire world has basically turned their backs on them. When I was in the army, we were training Haitian police officers. I think it was after one of their horrible revolutions or something along those lines.
Hmm.
I remember seeing that we weren't allowed to talk to them. They weren't allowed to talk to us. They were completely isolated because
Right.
I guess we talked amongst ourselves like we were worried they were going to run away and become illegal immigrants or something like that. But we're all 18-year-old kids and had no clue what we were talking about.
Right.
Yeah, but that's a devastating place. I mean, that's horrible. You're right.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that is one of the things, like with this book. Not all the stories are about slavery, but slavery is the presence because I mean, like throughout the duration of Black history, in the United States, obviously we talked about colonialism, and it's like the legacy, even once laws are passed and people are quote unquote free, it's like the it's not that easy to erase the legacy of colonialism and the weight that it has on people.
Yeah, I mean, we're also talking about the non-acceptance, right? And the lie, the 40 acres of a mule lie, and right, that didn't
Yeah,
really happen after slavery was eradicated. I mean, there's a stigma. I mean, the whole like you know African American farmers growing watermelon and freaking white farmers or plantation owners destroying the reputation of watermelon and making it a ridiculous fruit instead of whatever.
yeah.
It was horrible, horrible stories that matriculated all the way throughout history. Does he tell good stories? Does he tell a happy story? I mean, when he does that still shadow the tale? Can you ever escape it?
Right. Well, you can't, and I think definitely in this book, I think I misspoke before too. Slavery, and I think I said slavery ended after uh in Jamaica ended after it did here, but it's actually the other way around. It
Yeah,
ended
I mean,
before.
I would imagine it ended when it ended in England, but I don't know. My history is a little
Yeah,
bit
yeah.
more,
No, it was I want to say like a few decades earlier. Um,
just a few,
in the United States, yeah.
but it was
By
still
different.
brutal nonetheless.
Oh
And
yeah,
the
yeah,
African people the African heritage people in Jamaica aren't treated well, right? I
no,
mean, it's their island, but they're still like second class citizens, right?
no, absolutely, yeah. I mean, and there's a range of experiences there, but yes, it definitely is. Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that as a historical inaccuracy, but the the legacy, remains. But going back to what you were saying about in the story and like, telling, I forget how you phrased it, but just the idea of like, you
Well, I
know,
mean, it's a horrible, horrible history, right? I
right,
mean, slavery, the journey over Amistad, that movie is basically how I judge it. Been strapped down to a floor. I mean, people dying next to you. You're almost dead. That's how you get there. That's your ancestor. That's your
yeah,
forefather, right? That's your
yeah,
American whoever, and you don't even know who he is. He's a mystery. He's a blank slate. And that's a nightmare, right? You don't know who you are. I mean, do
Well,
you know who
absolutely.
you are as a Jamaican? I mean, can you back your ancestry up, or does it stop at a
I've been able to go to a certain point. This is definitely like an ongoing conversation I've had with my mother. I remember, I want to say back when I was in college, I really, just sat down with her and tried to figure out how far back we can, trace. And it did only go but so far. I mean, since that time, I've done one of the ancestry tests,
Oh, that's
and
cool.
yeah, I found out that I'm, 100% African, and a large part is is Nigeria, and there were, with DNA from a few other regions.
Well, we're
Um,
also talking about tribes, right? I mean, we're not talking about, you're not
right.
Nigerian, you're
Oh, exactly.
Tutu
Yeah.
or
Right.
Hulu. I know Hulu. I
But
don't know.
but there it is again, though,
It's insulting.
colonialism, and
Yeah.
how you're absolutely right. But because we're accustomed to defining these things by these lines, these
These arbitrary
arbitrary
lines
human,
that were,
human
yeah, man.
lines.
White colonials basically drew up to keep other white colonials out of their
Yeah,
diamond mines or whatever.
yeah, yeah,
Or European colonials. I mean, that's another term I don't like, is just like grouping people like colors. Wish we
yeah,
would be more specific.
yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, well, and that's a whole other discussion. I mean, I think you and I might have spoken about that previously. How, um, the label of white was something that was created along the way in order to divide people up, and a big part of that was to take downtrodden, people of European descent, and kind of keep them from identifying too much, or get in the way of them identifying with enslaved, African people or native people,
Hmm.
and so
Yeah.
it's kind of division, and it's like, hey, I'm not necessarily going to lift you up to where I'm at, but at least you're not those people over there. So that's a whole.
It's really a shame, dude. Growing up, you're proud, right? I mean, you're proud to strap on whatever nationality you're from, and then as you grow up, you realize that these stories of being an American are shrouded in lies and deceptions and horrible pain and suffering,
Yeah,
and you can't really break free of it. Even if you're Belgian, I mean, you look at your history, you've done horrible things to human beings in
right.
the name of economics.
Yeah, and you know what? Like that moment of realization that hopefully happens for people. A lot of Americans, even when it's right in their face, they'll bury their head in the sand, or make every excuse for it. But like I feel like, I don't know, I think it's everybody's responsibility, especially if you claim to be patriotic, once you know these things, to, I guess, learn from those experiences and work towards a better nation, and work towards the ideals that we oftentimes claim without having earned them in this country.
That's very interesting, because this guy, Strange Fruit, Volume One, he writes, no, Strange Fruit Volume One. I just don't want that to be the title for some reason. Strange Fruit Volume One.
Mm.
He writes about these various characters. They're vignettes. It sounds like short stories, or various ones all the way through.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
And it's really, really fascinating that you really can't break free from the shadow of hate and whatever it is. I mean, and the question that
Well,
started this was, does he write a happy story? And if he writes a happy story, can you ever escape that monstrous racism card, that
yeah.
thing that happens to
Well,
all?
yeah, and that, I mean, I think that's a really good question, and he does this dance, and I think you're going to be speaking to him, so it'll be really, good to have him on the show to describe it. But I'll definitely say, having read volume 1 and volume 2 of this series, I think one thing he does really well is he takes these stories, right, that are under this shadow of slavery, of colonialism, of brutality, and he doesn't do them a disservice in making them, goofy, or taking away the the weight of them. But what he does is, it's almost like his, because cartooning is like a language, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? It's the reason why. So there's certain things that are common to, like, all different cartoonists or comic creators, as far as like the medium, but what you do with that medium and how you apply your voice to it, it varies from creator to creator. And his voice, I know he has. So I'll give an example just to illustrate what I'm saying. I think first, just to answer your question really quickly, I think that he finds a very strong balance of, you know, telling of maintaining the gravity of these stories, or the world that happened around these stories. But then what he does, which I think is really interesting, is his style of cartooning has a natural sort of levity. I mean, I would say visually, but he still manages. He doesn't shy away from the fact that this stuff is awful. And like, there's little things that he does where um he so for instance, like, he finds creative ways to represent some of the really horrible stuff, like the ways that like just the horrible words and things, that dehumanizing language that people would apply to black people. As opposed to writing those words, he'll use symbolism of, ugly Sambo type caricatures,
Yeah.
which and what's interesting about that is, obviously, those caricatures aren't a real visualization of what black people are. Back when those caricatures, like, were all over, products and foods and signs and, minstrel shows, it was always this horrific, kind of overblown, gross, disgusting exaggeration of how black people were perceived, and by people who were flat out racist. But it didn't reflect us. And so what's interesting is, you'll see, uh, a character who is, like, you know, attacking or berating a black person, and there'll be a word bubble, and then you'll see the little blackface uh face, essentially, in the word bubble, and it symbolizes the fact that, like, these are the labels that are being put onto this person, but that's not necessarily them, because you can actually see the person side by side and see that that's not them. That's how they're being painted by this, messed up
Uh,
society. But
it's
it,
very
it
interesting, right? Because they kind of do that in modern society as well. If
yeah.
you're dealing with an African American in a pop culture setting, that person
Mhm.
has a tag: gangster, prisoner, convict, social worker, whatever you got. There's like this clichéical thing that you can put to it, right? In a
Yeah,
way,
yeah.
in modern
And
society too. I mean, in modern
well, yeah,
storytelling.
and I there one thing that I want to give credit to the person. It's escaped me exactly who said this, but there was a um
It's
like
the
a
internet, man. You can repurpose everything
right,
and give
right.
yourself credit for it.
I'm gonna try. I want to say it was Professor Blair Kelly. I try to just give tribute things to the people who said it. But she
Yeah.
was. I remember her speaking in an interview about the legacy of those types of imagery of like minstrel shows and the blackface imagery, and how there is a direct correlation to our media today. And it's not even necessarily, I mean, that stuff was deliberate. It was extremely deliberate. But the really screwed up thing about misrepresentations of black people in particular throughout history is that people absorb it, right? Like, so you'll have, like, like, white people will absorb it, and they might in their head think, like, the old cliche, like, I don't have a racist bone in my body, but they've grown up on a diet of media that kind of
Makes it
really,
impossible to stereotype, right? I mean,
well,
you can't
yeah, but they've grown up on a diet of media that has this insidious way of, you know, oh,
define
we
it,
might have a
right?
black character in there, but that we're not
Yeah.
going to get into who that character is the way we
No.
do, Matt Damon's character, or we're not necessarily going to. And that sends a message. You know what I mean? If you grew up watching movies and, hey, yeah, maybe the movie might have one or two black characters in it, but those characters either die super quick, or they're cast in a really negative light, or you just don't even know their name. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then you have all these other characters, a wide array of every type of human being. When it comes to white characters, it sends a message that these people aren't
Or different.
fully people in the, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? The way
It's
that
tribalism, isn't it? In a
right.
sense, it's my tribe versus your tribe. Your tribe's not as good as my tribe.
Right. And then think
And
about it, like those people absorbing those images, even if they don't necessarily, and sometimes they are straight up racist, but even if they don't feel that they are, even if they're people who are like not bad people for the most part, they absorb those images and then they create art that kind of reflects those same things. So there is a direct line from, you know, some of these horrible, you know, minstrel depictions like straight up to today when you see media. And that is why it's important for all different types of people to be able to tell their own stories.
yeah,
Because,
it
you
really is.
know, and like this book that we're discussing, like Strange Fruit, there's a there's a range of humanity represented in this. You know, and it just so happens that obviously the all the human beings represented are the protagonists are all Black people and like real life people throughout history, but their stories are very different. And I think that's one of the things that we're robbed of in a lot of narratives is that diversity of who we are. You know, you kind of
What about being robbed from the voice that this artist has to give? Do you think he's pigeonholing himself in a way by feeling like society's pressuring him to have to tell these specific stories because nobody is, and basically
no.
not being able to blow up as an artist and expand and become something bigger than just focusing on like the black narratives that he writes?
Well, I definitely think he could speak to that, but what I would say, having interviewed him before and spoken to him, and you know, read his work, and even from my own experiences, there's you being a Black person in America, you can try to escape, you know, the erasure. You can try to escape the othering that happens to you, but you're not really going to be successful. Either that or you'll make yourself sick from just, you know, pushing down reality
Yeah.
and you know, denying reality. And so what I'm saying is obviously this is one of you know, story that he's telling, but I think that, you know, sometimes I know for myself, like artistically, I've felt I don't only tell stories of struggle and de-struggle, but at the same
You
time I
have
felt a
diversity,
responsibility
don't you? Because
to.
your partner's not an African American; he's Latin American, right?
Oh yeah, on
Or
snow days, yeah,
yeah.
yeah, Leo, yeah, and but see,
So,
and that's the thing though. The way my worldview, right, is that obviously, you know, Latinx people have also had their voices, you know, just they have not been represented properly. So I think that
yeah.
like it's important for all marginalized people to step up for each other. And
For the artists though too, man, they have not been represented. They don't have the voices that they should have had throughout American history.
right,
You know what I mean? So, what do you think? What about Songs of the South? Do you know what I mean when I say that title, that Disney
yeah,
movie or
yeah,
something?
yeah,
Do you think that I saw that when I was a kid? You know, I
hmm
saw it in the movie theater
yeah.
in, you know, Fort Sill or something, and it was just a movie. You know, I really, really liked it, but they won't play it anymore. You know, it's not available. I guess you can find it on the internet or something. Do you think
Yeah,
that should be silenced? Because I mean, it obviously is racist, right? I mean, is it or is it not? I have no clue. I can't
no,
remember. I was a
it
kid. Like I
flat
said,
out
I loved it.
it is it is, but this is the thing, right? It's kind of like I think in our last conversation we talked about this. There's like the idea of saying that something is racist, and then there's the idea of racism. And you know, Jay Smooth, I definitely, you know, to give credit where it's due, I think I spoke about him last time, but he's a blogger and a vlogger who had this really precise video that came out about 10 years ago, and
Mhm.
it was titled How to Tell Somebody What They Said Was Racist. And the whole point of it was there's a reason I'm referencing this, but the whole point of it was that we live in a society, right, where people are so defensive when the
Yeah.
idea of racism and the word racism comes up, that you can't have it's hard to have a constructive conversation, especially if they think you're personally attacking them. A lot of times you won't even I've seen instances where people aren't personally attacking someone. They're actually not even speaking about that individual. They're speaking about what happens. But some people get so bent out of shape if racism is even mentioned, that they freak out and they shut down. And so like the point of what he was talking about is, in some ways it's way more important to have a discussion about racism, which is a structure. It's an institutional thing which exists in our society, and it's less important to prove what's in the heart of another person, even when you know damn well that some of these people are flat out racist. It's like that's not even what's important to me at this point, because it's kind of like, hey, if someone's walking around having a messed up thought about you, but they're not infringing on your
But it's not about you,
freedoms.
though. It's not about you. It's about how you look, right? It's about something that you have no control over. Like you, the dude, they have no clue, but you're just a guy that has dreadlocks or whatever you look like on a bus, and they look at you and hate you because that's what you look like,
Yeah,
right?
but I would
That's
go even farther.
racism.
Well, see, I would go farther than that. I would go farther than that and say it's not just that they hate what you look. I mean, that might be what they believe, right? They might believe like, oh
But
man, like,
everything else that goes with it, right? But they're
yeah,
not. They're not
well,
Marcus's thing. Is I mean, they don't hate you
everything
because
that,
you're Marcus.
yeah, but exactly, but it's like everything that they've been taught that I am, because it's like I know myself, like
Yeah.
even going to instances like what you're talking about. Yeah, I mean, I bump into people all the time that they'll ice grill me or whatever when I'm minding my own business. I'm in my own world doing my own thing, not interfering with their lives in the least. And I run into people, and you can feel the hate coming off of them. And I know that these people don't know who I am. They don't know my story. They don't know what I'm about. And they they feel threatened because they've been told to feel threatened, which kind of comes back to what I was saying about storytelling and how some of these things are perpetuated, because like people are fed poisonous ideas about who we are, like. And
Yeah.
so like
You know
in
what's really
the
fascinating to me is that you actually, I mean, the African American people in this country still have community in a way, right? It's been ghettoized. You've been forced to live there based on how much the rent is or where socialized, whatever are. But like the Italian Americans don't have community anymore. We don't have places where we can congregate and be Italian Americans, but African Americans do, right? I mean, you have these
Yeah, and
places that you
I
have
would I would
that are your
even
own.
yeah, and I would even go as far as to say, like, yes, there's definitely community out of necessity, and sometimes it transcends a living
Out of
space.
necessity. That's the unfortunate part. But yet, like
Well,
I think you're one of the last few, except for maybe Native Americans, which again is a sad story. They're forced to have it, but they have it.
right.
Like
Look, I mean,
I'm
I'll tell you one thing.
sure,
It's like a gift and a curse in a way.
right?
The one thing I was gonna say is like, sometimes it's geographical, right? Like what you're referencing, and sometimes even if you have, because obviously we're not monolithic, you know what I mean, and so sometimes you'll have black people who live in a variety of communities. Sometimes middle class, sometimes you know inner city,
And the
whatever you
sad
want
thing
to
though is
say.
that when you move out of your community and say you do move into a middle class neighborhood, you do feel ostracized. Isn't that the narrative that basically people
I
say
mean,
is that
at
you feel
times,
out of place?
but I'll tell you one thing. Like every every black person who lives in the middle class setting, they've got people who don't, you know what I mean, and there's the connections usually just don't end. That's not to say that some individuals aren't going to view you a certain way, but my point is, the connections don't necessarily stop, and that idea of community doesn't stop once your geographic setting changes. So we have this community by shared experience, and now even in the era we're in, where technology has allowed us to take some of these things that have been a part of our reality since the inception of this country, like you know police brutality, like police literally getting away with murder, and all these things that happen, or just vigilantes like George Zimmerman feeling that they have the right to end somebody's life because they feel afraid. You have all these things that have happened, and it's like technology has given us a bit more of a voice. But what's really frustrating about that is sometimes you'll have these cases where there's a police report, they're like, oh, this person didn't do what we said, and the police report, and then the video shows something totally different. And to this date, one of the only times a police officer has been held accountable for the fact that like what he reported and what actually happened were vastly different was that dude in North Carolina who killed I remember the man who was killed. His name was
Oh, I
Walter
remember this.
Scott.
Yeah, did he die for his truck though? Like
Well, no,
randomly,
what
weirdly
happened? What
enough,
happened?
something odd.
Yeah,
I love
it was
that
it was
video.
a
I hate all these videos, man. They drive me crazy. It's like,
yeah.
why does this suck so bad? Why does that cop suck?
Well,
Why
listen.
does why does another guy suck? And why are they both sucking right now
Well,
together?
look, I'm not even gonna go say Walter Scott sucks because literally all he did, he ran, right? He ran from a
Yeah.
traffic stop, which you can say like, oh well, he shouldn't have ran or whatever, but he wasn't posing any threat, and you
He
know,
didn't deserve to die. I mean,
listen,
honestly, he
yeah,
deserved to live. And that's what sucks about it is like, why didn't just go to jail? Why'd you run? But then why'd you shoot him? And it's like they're both being dumb. And it's like, oh God, guys, you shouldn't have a gun, first off, right?
right, and
Shouldn't
flat
have a
out,
fucking gun.
yeah,
And then your social situation should be a lot fucking better than it is because it sucks.
right,
So I mean, bad. I mean, it's
yeah.
horrible. We don't know where that dude came from. That in his mind, running at that moment was the only thing that came.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that because, like,
Right.
for me, it's interesting when in these narratives, it always comes down to the police officer saying, "I feared for my life. I feared for my life," which is a whole other story. I'm
Fuck
not
your
even gonna
life,
go
man.
down.
You just ended a life. I mean, it's just fuck
Exactly
your life.
right.
You're a cop. You're supposed to
Yeah.
protect. You're supposed to take bullets for us. That's what we hired you for.
Well,
We gave
no,
you
yeah,
$35,000 to be our bulletproof vest. You
yeah.
don't want to be a bulletproof vest. Let somebody else do it, right? I mean,
Well,
that's what they're
yes,
there
yeah.
for.
No, you're exactly. I mean, yeah, that's a whole other subject, absolutely, though. But
I
like,
mean, I'm all about the prison system getting rehauled too right now. I'm so mad. I'm so
yeah,
happy that they're striking. I want it gone, dude. I want them to. I heard a quote. I watched a documentary recently. I can't remember what it's
was
called.
it the 13th?
I don't think so. Isn't that about cops?
Oh no, the 13th is it's about the prison industrial complex, and it's about the way that I mean the title of the 13th comes from the 13th Amendment, which in essence ended slavery, but
Yeah, but
this
slavery's still existing.
right, exactly. But this documentary, like, it's by Ava DuVernay, and it highlights the fact that the prison system was so, like, in the 13th Amendment, it says that slavery is essentially ended except for in instances of, like, law enforcement and where people are convicted of a crime, then it's like slave away. And this documentary really really masterfully, like, breaks down the contradictions and the really messed up things that happen in our society, and the ways that the prison system is slave labor. It's like on the books legal slave labor. So yeah, but I mean, I forget where I was even going. We were talking about we're talking.
Oh,
Well, actually, you had asked me about Song of the South. I think
yeah.
I
Well, I
got
mean,
kind of got.
ultimately, what we're talking about is narratives, right?
Yeah,
We're talking
yeah,
about specific moments in people's lives that Joel Christian Gill
right,
decided makes interesting stories.
right,
And what brings that up, what you have with that are these things that kind of flavor those stories, right? I mean, we have a history of slavery. We have a history of trying to group people, othering people and versing people. You know what I mean? It's like, you are different, so I am your enemy.
right,
My neighborhood is cleaner than your neighborhood because we're better than you. And it's all about wheat, right? Who has the most food? I care more about my family than your family.
right.
But honestly, I mean, these individual lives in prison that are being lost or being warped because of the
Mhm.
violence they have to undergo,
Yeah.
I mean, that's irreparable, right? I mean, you can't ever get those back. They're
Wow.
fingerprints. They're unique. And
Yeah.
every single negative thing that happens to them, they become worse people.
Yeah. And actually, yeah, and absolutely. And that is I guess brings me back to I think where I was going to was I was just saying, about this idea of community out of necessity. And if you look at that, like, there are so many things that connect us regardless of your community. Like, I mean, Black people who live in the projects have the same conversations with their kids about, you know, what to watch out for with the police as, people in the suburbs and just America, and how they're going to be perceived, how you literally do have to be, twice as good to get half
Can't
of
be
the
good though,
recognition,
man.
you
The
know.
average American commits 3 felonies a day.
Right, right,
Average American. I want to arrest you for some crime and throw you in prison the rest of your life. I'll find something
Mm.
and I'll put you in a jail cell and I'll get a defense attorney to tell you you're fucked and you got to take this deal. And you'll think, oh my God, I'm going to prison for life. I might as well do 5 years. And then you're in jail for 5 years and you kill somebody. Boom,
Ye-
death row. You know what I mean? You touch
Yeah.
a guard in the wrong way, 20 years. I mean,
Yeah.
every little tiny thing in our society is geared to fuck us. And as soon as you get fucked, you just constantly bend over. There's no way to fix it. So you get mad. I mean, you rob grocery stores and liquor stores or run from the cops. You don't want to go back to prison. Who the fuck wants to go back to prison? Nobody, right? I'm going to run too if I have to deal with that. That's the nightmare that's chasing me.
Yeah. 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 And
And
um,
that cop's afraid of getting killed.
right.
Did that
Yeah.
cop?
Well, and yeah, actually, just to finish my thought on that regard, it's kind of like, we're going back to Walter Scott. Like when people say, like, what was in his mind when he ran away. I mean, I can guess, and I can guess that he's seen the same images, heard the same stories of
Wants to
people
keep his
murdered,
freedom, man. Did
being
he ever go to
murdered by the
jail?
police, and not,
Did he have
and
a record? Did he spend time in lockup or anything?
I don't remember, but it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter because,
Well, I
like,
mean, in terms of like not wanting to lose your freedom, if you had lost it in the
right. I
past,
know
you know how
what I
horrible.
recall. What I recall is I think that he might had a history of I'm sure someone will correct me if I'm incorrect, but I think he might have had like some traffic violations or something, was my
Not something that
understanding.
locked him
But
up, though,
but it
right? Or did they
wasn't
lock him
something
up?
violent. No, it wasn't.
No.
And this is my point though. It's kind of like, police bring up the point about being scared, and it's kind of like, look, I know my blood pressure goes up sometimes when I see the sirens going behind me, and it's not even for me. You know
Now,
what I
see, my
mean?
blood pressure goes up if I see a cop at all.
Right, right.
I see a car that might look like a cop because they don't all are marked, right? I mean, I'm looking at them going, I'm gonna get pulled over or something. What's going on? I
Yeah,
hate it. They
yeah.
cause problems. I mean, there's sharks in the water, right?
And that
You're
is what it
driving
feels like. It
cars.
feels like,
I've been in an accident because there was a cop right there. We're both watching the cop,
yep,
and the dude bumped into me.
yep. No, I know what you mean. And this is the thing. It's like, I know hashtag not all cops, but like one of the things that frustrates me is that, a lot of times it's a very one-sided narrative, right? Like people talk
Mhm.
about Black Lives Matter and they distort what is being said there, and they say, oh, it's terrorist, blah blah blah, which is all nonsense. At the end of the day, it's literally what the words say. That's
Yeah,
the whole thing, is that our lives mattered. And if you
everybody's lives
really
matter.
break
Yeah,
it down, nobody whose lives are treated with value even feels the need to
to
state
ask for the
that their
yeah.
lives matter. You know what I'm saying? And that is the whole entire message. And so when people respond to that and say all lives matter or blue lives matter, what they're saying is, shut up. I don't want to hear, this is inconvenient to me. You know what I mean? And like,
Yeah.
I don't want to hear about, any injustice. And if you think about it, it's kind of like, um when people say all lives matter, it's kind of like, okay, that includes Black Lives Matter. So
It
this
does.
shouldn't bother you.
So it just shouldn't bother me if I just minimize that statement a little tiny bit and just include myself specifically. Shouldn't
Right.
bother anybody. Really
And in
shouldn't.
addition to that, when you talk about Blue Lives Matter, it's kind of like, yes, of course they
Of
do.
course they do. We don't
Of
want all
course they
cops to
do.
die. We don't want
Right.
murder.
But beyond that, right? Like, look at the disparity, right? If a Black person is killed, like literally by the people who are there to
Yes, they
protect
protect
us
them. He
ostensibly,
deserves to be protected too. Black Lives
then
Matter.
yeah, and that the police officer is not going to do any time for that 9.9 times out of 10, but when a police officer is killed or even hurt,
Life.
they will tear up entire
You're
communities
gone.
to
That doesn't
make
matter. You
somebody
get a
pay.
shoplifting charge, they're gonna
You
rip
know?
you a new one. You know what
But
I
this is
mean?
my point though. Like we don't need to put it on a bumper sticker or tell people that blue lives matter, because
Yeah.
we live it every day. We know they matter. But what you're saying when you try to like paint over, the idea of Black Lives Mattering with that statement is saying like, oh no, I matter more than you. And I mean, to bring it back to the book,
Oh man,
because it's
it's
funny.
really sad. I mean, I was in the army. I mentioned this a lot. I
Yeah,
saw
yeah.
pictures in the battalion area of 18-year-olds. This has been on my mind lately.
Hmm.
18-year-olds who fell on grenades, and saved
Yeah.
6 of their buddies, but they died a hero. So their name is on this wall that I get to read about. I mean, as far as individuality, that person's is done at 18 years old. Whatever that guy in Baltimore who ran, his life is over with at 38 years old. I mean, these narratives are cut short when they could be long. Guy could have offered something to somebody who could have done something, the connections, the butterfly wings, the ripples in the pond. I mean, what we're creating is horribleness.
Right.
I know the system's corrupt. I know the system's not going to work for me because it didn't work for me. I know the system wouldn't work for you if you got mauled up in it. We are going to get screwed regardless. We're going to pay too much in taxes. We're going to watch Donald Trump become elected president. At the end of the day, you're 40 something years old. You're looking at the system going, this fucking sucks.
Yeah.
Not just for Black people, but I mean, you look at your history from your family getting to Jamaica, or, a person in Georgia or something, their family getting to this country, nightmare, right? And it didn't stop. It still has not stopped.
Well, and you know what? I mean, like, think about it. You're absolutely right. And so, I mean, you bring up a lot of good points in the sense that it sucks for all of us. And, going back to my earlier point about,
but the fact that it sucks for you makes it suck for me too, because you're not happy.
No,
you're not happy.
Well, yeah, I'm not
like
happy.
If I deny my daughter something and she starts screaming for 15 minutes, I'm like, my life sucks. I might not have let her have something that was dangerous or whatnot, but at the end of the day, I suffered for it. Right. And if we make you suffer for being different, or whatever it is, we suffer at the end of the day, because, man, we're making humans.
Absolutely. And at the end of the day, institutions that dehumanize people are harmful for everyone. They're harmful for the people who are being affected and afflicted, and they're harmful for the people who are doing the offense. And I oftentimes say, like, white supremacy as a structure, ruins everything for everybody. What's that?
Right? I mean, in terms of like a color being better than another color, it's just so ridiculous.
Yeah, but absolutely. But white supremacy, so it's like the idea of white supremacists is obviously are people who are very simple-minded, and they're like blah blah blah,
Well, what is it? They want to be a master race, right? They think that they can be, they're being held down by the other substandard or substandard races or whatever.
Right. Well, what they perceive as
what it is, we are all part of the master race. I mean, we have done so much good together, and every time that we divide, just horrible things happen.
Right.
Right.
So,
I mean,
yeah, absolutely. But this is the thing. It's like the idea of like white supremacy as a structure, as opposed to just kind of like individuals with a real screwed up, mindset. As a structure, it is the idea of, quite simply, like, white people being the default and everyone else being outsiders who are
holding them down, basically.
And and it's destructive. It is vastly destructive.
But we are one people. We all came from Africa, right? I mean, as far as our Homo sapien DNA suggests,
right?
And you're 100% African. You're 100% Homo sapien. You are the human. You are what out of that we all became. You're that thing that won, right? Me, they do my DNA. I'm going to have some Neanderthal in there. I'm going to have some other stuff in there. I'm not going to be 100% Homo sapien. You 100% are. So when you're talking about the master race, you already are the master race, and everybody else is being stupid because the Neanderthals lost, right? My ancestors died.
Yeah, I mean, but at the end of the day, right? Like, even for myself, there's little victory in being
the
master race.
The DNA victor.
Yeah, like, because at the end of the day, it's like we really need to be working towards a world where just things are equitable for all human beings, and like people will fight tooth and nail. People will fight tooth and nail to the point where they will elect the most unelectable human being of all time.
Russia, I don't even know at this point. I really
we don't even need to go down that rabbit hole of but
ultimately the dude lost the popular vote. I mean,
well, I mean, he lost the popular vote, but think about it. How disturbing is it? He still had to be, even though he lost the popular vote, like by a healthy margin, by a very
3 million, man.
Yeah. Still, the idea that as many people voted for him as they did, even when you factor in Russian interference, even when you factor in Russian collaboration, whatever, like the fact that as many people voted for like the most unelectable guy of all time just because he was preaching a message of hate. You know, I say it very
Yeah.
often, but there aren't like real supporters of him. There's not people who truly like him. They might think they like him,
Yeah.
but they like the fact that he hates the people.
The mafia
They
won
hate.
the election, man. I mean, the bad guys won. I mean, at the end of the day, when we had that election, we could have voted for Hillary Clinton.
Yep.
I loved Barack Obama. I thought he was a magnificent man. I thought he had so much charisma. When he spoke, it was like, hell yeah.
Yep.
But our government in Washington, D.C. sucked so bad that he couldn't do anything. He didn't get
Absolutely, yeah.
out of his presidency. What a wasted opportunity. We had a great mind. We had a great man. We had morals. And it was squandered by the freaking pious assholes from the South, right?
Yep. And by just you know, blatant racism. I mean, if you think back, so yeah, I agree. Everything you said about you know, President Obama, I agree with. But those were 8 rough years, because as much as we found inspiration in seeing, you
Him
know, this
do what he
president,
did, and his wife and his children, and just
right,
be the pinnacle that we can all strive for, because that's a human being who did good things.
right, and as much you know, joy and greatness as we can find in those things, those years were just littered with
Yeah.
like blatant racism. And I mean, to the point where like the movement that, you know, if you want to call it that, I mean, maybe a bowel movement, but the movement that led to us having you know, this current guy in the office, like really started then. I mean, he even started his blatantly racist birther claims.
Oh my God, while Obama was president,
Yeah,
in
exactly.
2008. But I will tell you this, man, I didn't vote for him, but I looked at those names. Hillary Clinton, who cheated, the Democratic Party cheated to have her name on the list, right? I mean, that's documented.
Yep.
Or this guy promising that the system sucks and he's going to make a difference. I went, okay, I can't vote for the fucking retard. I got to vote for, you know, Hillary Clinton. I got to vote for the first woman president.
Yeah.
But I mean, ultimately, a lot of other people said, I can't handle this anymore. Our government sucks. 39%, 18%. What is our Congress at? 18% approval rating, something ridiculous like that.
Yeah.
We want a difference.
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, you know, since we've gone down this road of politics, I will say this: like, one thing, and I really hope that America like listens to this, not necessarily to me, but just this concept, right? I have many, you know, many friends who want to see a better world, and they really want to vote with their convictions every time. And I think it's admirable. I wish that like every time there was a candidate that, like, you know, held my values of wanting a just world for everybody. I wish there was a candidate that wasn't beholden to big business and everything. But the fact of the matter is, and you know, a lot of times people flat out are like, I don't want to vote for the lesser of two evils. But at the end of the day, right, we are looking at the type of upending of democracy, of
Either
what
way,
little freedoms we had. We're looking at how bad it can get when people are like, I don't want the less.
We can't be what we were.
Right. The greater of two evils is far more destructive than the lesser of two evils.
And we can't go down that road either. I mean, the guy is friends with every dictator on the planet because that's the preferable method for people like him. He does not want to he doesn't want to risk another election.
Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately. But I mean, to go back to Joel Christian Gill, he's got to write about this subject, right? I mean, he's got to have all this nuance in these characters to some degree.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, these characters end up here. You know, this is not an optimistic future. This is pessimistic, where you get pulled over and you're not sure. You know what I mean?
Right.
You could be, you know, a pretty black lady in Dallas, get arrested and die in jail. You know, oh, how the fuck that happened?
Well,
you know what I mean? This is a scary, scary nightmare time. And does he write about it? And how does he make it entertaining? Because I write these nightmare stories too, and I don't think they work.
Well, to bring it back, because it's so funny. I love our discussions, but there is literally so much to discuss when you're talking about America and history and exclusion. But so oftentimes we touch all sides of it, and it's great. But to like you said, to bring it back to what the stories that Joel Christian Gill is telling, I think that there is an immense value in what he's doing here. Because think about it like this, right? Like, people, when you exclude people from storytelling, right, like going way back into the very beginnings of man, right, we've storytelling has been essential, to us, and how we carry on traditions, how we tell history, everything, you
Mm.
know how we know who we are. They tell us, stories tell us who we
Oh
are,
my God, dude, it's so cool because we just talked about a person whose story was taken away from him because
right,
he ran.
yeah,
You don't matter, dude, because you ran. You did
right,
something wrong and you deserve to die because you ran. Fuck your story, right? And that's what we're saying about him.
yeah,
That's exactly what you just said. We excluded his story because he doesn't matter.
right.
This
So
guy wants to tell that story.
yeah, and so the that exclusion has consequences, like going back to what I was saying. It's kind of like, I can't tell you how many movies I love too. It's not even like every time I see a movie where, like, the black characters are sidelined, I'm like, oh man, F this movie, and I throw it
Mhm.
out the window. Some movies are that bad where I do feel like that. But, like, sometimes it'll be a good movie, and I'm like, man, I love that movie, I just don't like the way they did the one black character. You know what I mean? But, like, my point is, like, what I was going back to my point about how we, even black people, like, everybody absorbs these messages in this media that excludes us. And this inclusion that Joel Christian Gill is doing with just a lot of skill, a lot of care, and a lot of nuance, this includes, it's very thoughtful work, you know what I mean? And
Mhm.
it does represent a wide range of blackness. And the fact that he chose to focus specifically on uncelebrated narratives is very important, because what it does is, think about it, like, think about the names that pop into your head. I know you might know more names than these, but, like, when the first ones that pop in your head when you think of, like, Black History Month or Black History, obviously you got MLK, you got Rosa Parks,
Hank Aaron, right? I'm not
sometimes,
Hank Aaron.
yeah,
Who's the
exactly,
guy
Hank
who played for
Aaron.
the Dodgers?
Sometimes, if people want to
Was
get
that Hank
really
Aaron?
brave, what's that?
Who played for the Dodgers? Who broke that color barrier? Was that Hank Aaron? No, that was Rob. What the hell's his name?
No, no,
The Dodgers guy.
yeah, yeah, no, no, you're thinking about
Oh
Jackie Robinson. Jackie
there you go.
Robinson.
Thank you. My God, that was not the name anywhere near
Yeah,
the tip of
yeah,
my tongue, but yeah, thank you.
right.
Anyway, not to derail you, and that
Yeah,
was
yeah. No, no, but my point is that, you have, when you tell these stories, right, you're saying, no, stop. We do matter, and I'm going to give you a lot of evidence of how we matter, and I'm going to go beyond those names. Because what happens, right, when you have these limited um people who society deems as, like, okay, if I have to talk about black people, I'll talk about, Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks, maybe Harriet Tubman, and yeah, maybe Jackie Robinson. But,
yeah.
but what happens is they're treated like special people, dare I say, credits to their race. And,
Yeah.
it's like, that's no good. Nobody wants to be a credit to their race. You know what I mean? When our race has value, and there's tons of great people, you know what I mean? And it shouldn't be a surprise, like kind of like when people tell me that I'm so well spoken. It's
Yeah.
like, that's not a compliment, because yeah, I am. Like, I don't need you to tell me that. So the fact that this book is like weaving these true stories and saying, like, no, you need to look at this. I do think that there's a lot of value in that, and in what Joel Christian Gill is doing here. And I think that his power as a storyteller, when I had a chance to speak to him, one of the things that he talked about is the fact that this is an all ages book, and that, just from a pure storytelling point of view, um carries certain challenges with it when you're dealing with, a history that is heavy, and he found a way to do things. So, kind of like what I was speaking about before, about how he would visually represent some of these, like, really ugly things. So, as opposed to, like, putting all the horrible language that people use about black people, he would use these icons that immediately communicate all the hate, the bile, and everything. But it's also like, if you give this book to your 8-year-old to read, they're not going to have to sit through reading, you know what I mean, those words. You know, and this work, like he doesn't necessarily focus on, like, you know, like lynchings. There are stories where that is a part of the story, and he doesn't pave over it and act like it is thing, but he doesn't necessarily, like, you know, put it up there in gory detail either. So I mean, I think he finds a way to really walk a line of telling these stories and not robbing them of their seriousness, but he also really injects a lot of humanity into these stories. And I think that that is a thing that has been kind of that's been lacking from a lot of stories, you know, that deal with us and deal with our history. And you know, and like I said, I can't stress enough, like I love all of the figures in Black history who are held up as the models that, you know, they're willing to speak about. But when you stop at those models, like, you know, you're really, again, you're erasing all of the other people that deserve to be celebrated, you know. So I mean,
I
it's
mean,
you,
what they are, though, when you look at Martin Luther King, he's not really just an African American role model, though. You mentioned him, you're saying he's an American role model. He's
right,
actually stating the principles that we should be living by as a country.
absolutely,
You know,
absolutely,
his narrative includes us all because we're like, "Dude, we should be like that." You know, Gandhi's the same way globally. You look at him and what he did, those peaceful, I mean, they just transcend.
hmm,
People in England love Martin Luther King. I mean, what does that mean, right? But these people that Joel Christian Gill is writing about, that provides more of a microcosm of a moment in
right,
history. Like the Harriet Tubman is also kind of like a social whisper, like a thing that happened that more people should do. A hero, a stand-up person that,
yeah.
you know, a Caucasian person. I just hate using the word white. You know what I mean? It just really bothers me. I don't know what to say otherwise, because I mean, it's so, you're so like mixed in with various things.
Yeah,
You
I mean,
can't
you know,
name
think
it.
about it. Sometimes it's, you know, language is an interesting thing, and I
Yeah.
think that,
Because I mean, thinking about that word that you don't want to say, I'm definitely not going to say it, but still exists. What
right,
happens to it at the end of the day? Because it connotates like slavery. You know, the thing of being that person that doesn't belong to himself. You know,
right,
it's a horrible, disgusting word. You
right.
know, it puts you below having. I mean, you have a worth. Somebody can buy it. You know what I mean? You can be traded back and forth. You're a commodity. That's what that word means. And eventually, it needs to go away, right? But it can't. Can it?
Yeah. Well,
Being
I
that
mean,
white,
society
that
hasn't
word.
been willing to change. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like,
Very
it's,
true.
you know, it's interesting because, like, you know, words and just a lot of these things are, at the end of the day, they're like a manifestation of a much deeper, you know, I don't
Cancer.
know if I want to say truth, but a much
Oh,
deeper essence. Like, you know what I
yeah.
mean? There's something so at the end of the day, you know, if society is not willing to change and not really willing to be honest about, like, what has happened and how connected what's happened is to what we're dealing with today, then yeah, it's difficult for a lot of these symptoms to go away, you
Yeah.
know.
Does he write optimistically? I think I asked the question earlier
Yeah,
on in the
I would
conversation. I
say
mean,
so. I would say so because, look, there is something inherently optimistic to knowing about, like, all of this, right? All of this history, all of this struggle, you know, and um being able to look back at that and to look forward and to get up in the morning, to be quite frank.
yeah.
Like, there's a James Baldwin quote. He's one of my favorite writers of all time, and he was asked, I'm going to paraphrase it because I don't remember the exact wording, but he was asked about if he was an optimist or not. And you know, I think that the person who asked him this was probably expecting him to say no, right? Because James Baldwin was very outspoken in his condemnation of inequality and racism, you know,
Yeah.
and structural racism. And you know, so I think the interviewer was expecting him to say, no, I'm not an optimist, but he said, yes, I'm definitely an optimist. And his point was to, um I'm really paraphrasing this. I need to look this up. But his point was that he is an optimist because to know everything that's happened in our history, in our bloody history, and America, and all the things that have happened to Black people in particular, to be able to still look forward, and um with hope and everything. Like, you can't help but be an optimist, and in a lot of ways, a lot of us are optimists, like, as Black people. And I was like, yeah, I identify with that. I do, because
Yeah.
I'm not I'm not optimist in the sense I'm like, man, everything's great and there's no problems, and it's all sunshine. But I am an optimist in the sense that, I'm just crazy enough to believe that we can work towards closing that divide between how things are and how they should be, you know.
Forming community, right? I mean, at the end of the day, you're not going to be able to change dude's mind who's hardcore going to hate on you because you're different,
Right.
from a different tribe or whatever. But you can form community, right? That doesn't matter. And you're talking about this guy and the stories that he's created. And I'm thinking about Black Panther because that's a badass movie. And it didn't
Yeah.
really matter what the cast of characters were, the color, or the director. They got together, they collaborated, and they made a wonderful story that, you know, made billions of dollars or $1 billion or what it made. I mean, made people want to watch it and excited people and
Yeah.
activated imaginations. They didn't beg. They
Right.
didn't say, please come see my movie. It's about Black people or whatever. No, they said, here's a badass freaking movie. Come see it. And people
Yeah.
did. And they gave him tons of money. And it didn't matter. And the
Yeah.
same thing
I know
about
what you
this guy.
mean.
I mean, he's
I know
not
what
writing about Black people. He's writing about people who just happen to be of a color that is different. They have more, what is it, melatonin in their skin. That's all it is,
melanin.
really.
Yeah. But I
Melanin,
mean,
sorry.
yeah, I hear what you're saying. But what I would say, the only difference I would say is that, like, for instance, so in Joel Christian Gill's book, um, yes, in the what I was just talking about like the difference between the world as it is and as it should be. In the world as it should be, then we would be able to say, like, he's writing about people who just happen to be Black. But in the world as it is, there is a necessity in, I mean, the fact that his subjects are Black is really central to it. And it does matter in the sense that, we live in a world of where that exclusion has been omnipresent.
Oh
We
yeah,
live
but
in a
as a
world.
storyteller, you're working on conflict anyway, right? And then especially on historical narratives, it's kind of like a cheat, especially where the interaction that the character is going to have in a particular setting, right? Because that's going to be instant conflict that you're going to have to resolve throughout that course of that story. So it's beautiful. That's what you look for, right?
It is, yeah, absolutely. And he is he's dealing, like, with the real narratives, right? So he had to figure out how to unpack this history. And yeah, when I spoke to him, he honors, like, what happened. It's not like he's, like, taking it as an extremely rough outline, and then he's just kind of like, totally creating a new story.
No,
He
he's
really
writing about
honors the
heroes
stories.
doing heroic stuff
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And
and villains doing horrible stuff too. I mean, he's got both of them happening here. I mean, if you want to look at these narratives in a way, you could look at the failure in humans as well that are causing the conflict for these characters, making them have to ship themselves in a box on a train. I
right.
mean, the best part about, I don't know if you read it, you probably would have in an English class, Hills Like White Elephants, written by Ernest Hemingway. You know
Actually,
that
I didn't.
story?
Yeah.
You didn't read that.
No.
It's a very, very, very boring story about two people sitting on a train platform talking about the hills that look like white elephants. It's like
Mm.
500 words. It's over very quickly. But the nuance is that they're talking about an abortion that the girl is going to have once they get back to wherever they're going, and then they're going to go their separate ways. They don't
This
actually say
sounds
that.
familiar. Actually, I think I may have read and forgotten about this. But
But the nuance is that one person doesn't want to have a kid and the other one does, and that they're in conflict for it. One person wants this person, this different tribe, to get off their land or whatever have you, or own them and make them do things for them.
yeah, yeah. But the I hear what you're saying. In Strange Fruit, I
Mhm.
think Joel Christian Gill has really found a way to center the the Black, these uncelebrated, people
Yeah.
who did great things and have these great stories. They are at the center of the story, and I think that is really important, because throughout history we've always been on the margins of the story. There's this line that I often come back to in Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man,
Mm.
where he said he said like something, again paraphrasing, he said like, those of us living outside of history, in speaking about black people in particular, about the main character was referring to himself in that way, but he was also coming to a realization about his place as a black person in America, and there's that idea of living outside of history. And you know
As in, like, not in the narrative, but causing the narrative. Is that what I'm understanding? I'm understanding it differently. Yeah.
exactly,
Okay.
as in like just being excluded, perpetually excluded.
Just a
and
name, just the
and
Chinese workers working on the railroad. But my
right,
God, how important, right? Every freaking pickfall or whatever, every shovelful of rock. I mean,
right,
they
and
carved this nation.
think about
Man,
your human story, think about, all of us, right? But I mean, we can all, I think, relate most through the lens of looking at our own human story, right? Think about all the things that make you you, and you know everywhere you've been, and the people who love you, think about all the things that they know about you, that makes them, love you, right? And imagine if like that's all stripped away, and it's not there. I mean, and imagine if like it's not just you that where it's being stripped away. Imagine if it's, you and everyone who comes after you in your lineage down the line, like, you know what I mean, and everybody behind you, you know what I'm
so
saying? Like,
cool.
it takes a toll, it takes a big toll, to know that that's just how it is, like, even for
Sucks.
myself, right? You're going back to my optimism is despite knowing the fact that I'm coming to the table like automatically excluded in a lot of ways, and knowing that like I can be, intelligent, I can represent myself well, I can do whatever, but I'll always be, by a certain amount of people, I always will always be perceived in a very limited way. That's not everybody, but like there is, it's like, for all of us human beings, going back to your point about America kind of like sucking for everyone who's not a wealthy person. um
Everybody not in a community. I mean,
so
honestly, you could have a great life within like a large body of people that believe like you believe.
right,
And the unfortunate thing is there's another large body of people that want to get your large body to believe like they do. And if you don't, they'll just eradicate your large body so you don't exist anymore, messing them up. I mean,
yeah,
basically that's
yeah.
what they've done, right? I mean, they've ruined things
But
by
yeah, but
making
think
people
about
have
it
to
like
run.
this, right? Think about it. It's like you have that, right? So there's so many things that all of us, have in common. Just being human, right? Like getting up in the morning, and hopefully you don't get hit by a bus. Hopefully, you know, I
You
don't
don't
know,
get
like,
diagnosed with a brain tumor and have 2 weeks to live. I mean, yeah,
right?
there's a
Yeah,
lot of things
yeah.
that can happen to you on a daily basis.
There's
But I've
there's
heard that
baseline.
death, you just stop worrying about it, so it won't matter. But what you leave behind is a lot of life, and that does matter. So every
Yeah,
impact and echo that you make during your life, footprint that you leave behind, it matters. I mean,
yeah.
even though that you're not going to be in the history books, your voice is going to matter to somebody. I love it. I don't know if you're on Reddit at all.
No, not really.
No. I mean, it's basically, the worst place. No, it's the second worst place
That,
on the internet.
that's kind of why I'm not there. But yeah,
But
I
I
had
mean, it's
gathered
just
that.
there's amazing places though, like history and pictures or something like that, old school, cool, where people will post pictures of their family members from decades and decades past. And you look at these people whose names don't matter, right? Their impact was, $50,000 in taxes during their life that built a little bit of a road. I mean, that's basically all they did. They raised a child that became a doctor that saved 25 people's lives over the course of his career. And those 25 people were able to have kids and do something miraculous. I mean, these echoes are amazing, but they don't have names, right? I mean, we don't matter. We're like the sex organs of this machine that just keeps perpetually pushing out technology that improves lives. And what should make us mad is that there's a whole section of people whose histories have been erased, like your lineage. How far can you go back? How many generations did you and your mom discuss?
Um, that is a good question. I wrote it all down. I need to pull it out because, like I said, it's been, that was in college, and that was years ago. So I do need to pull it out. And I actually meant to like really, I mean, my mom and I spoke recently about really kind of going back through all that, and and trying to see how far we could go. So I
But it
don't
probably ends at a
really
guy on a boat, right? I mean, you probably can find.
I don't even think that we knew that far. I could be wrong because there's a
Honestly.
certain point where it gets hazy,
Right, because
because
slaves, if you had a kid, the kid was considered property. You didn't get to give the kid your last name.
right,
The owner gave the kid a name. The
yeah.
owner potentially sold that kid to slavery someplace else, was
I don't know
raised by somebody else.
if you've seen Henry Louis Gates's series on PBS. It's not exclusively about black people, but it's the one where he goes back through people's lineage and he'll kind of like do research.
Oh, I have seen a little bit of that, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, it's an amazing show, and I mean, there are people from all over. So there's people of European descent, there's people of African descent, there's people from all over. But one of the things that's really interesting when he does have black people on the show is, you know, they have to really do some incredible investigative work because to really to really get past those bumps, right? Like, because you know how it is. It's like what you're describing, how I can talk to my mom, but it gets to be a certain point where they're like, oh, they don't really know exactly who this person is, and maybe there is like one person will describe, I think they were this, I think they were that, but like it gets really hazy at a certain point.
No
And
doubt, man.
when you watch Henry Louis Gates's show, they have to the record keeping was terrible. Like even in the United States, like
Well, not even that. My mind is working on this idea that, I mean, just imagine coming from this place in Africa, you're being kidnapped by other Africans, right? Another tribe down the road, however it works as slave traders, right? You're taken from your people who aren't already regarded very well. So if you have any ancestors or relatives left, they might be killed. You're being attacked
right.
relentlessly throughout history, group by group, millions dying. So I mean, your ancestors might not even exist anymore. They might have been eradicated. So where are you going to pull the DNA from? I mean, there's not going to be a random person in Africa going 23andMe, check my blood too, and it's like, hey, Marcus, we're cousins or whatever, because that dude probably didn't get to live, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, but so there's two sides to the slave trade, right? There is definitely, obviously the dark circumstances which were faced by our ancestors who were taken away, but then there's also there was a real toll that all those people being removed from home took.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that left an impact behind as well. So it's kind of like on both sides of the globe. You know what I mean? Like slavery, going back to that theme of bigotry hurting everybody. That's a case of that. So um going back to my point though, just about what were we talking about? The about the sorry, I got sidetracked. We were talking what
That's
were we talking
that's my
about?
job, man. I just sidetracked you. Make you.
No, it's all good. I mean, we're hitting on a lot of important things, but going back to the idea of oh, I know what we're talking about. Yes, we're talking about how you get to those points we can't see. Like on Henry Louis Gates's show, they do some really in-depth research, and they do get to these bumps where they're like, huh, like we get to this spot and we know maybe where your people go back to originally because of your DNA, but we're having trouble figuring out some of the people in the middle because it just seems to stop at a certain point. And they do manage to uncover a lot of things. And like sometimes in some of the stories, it'll be a case where somebody had to change their name, obviously, because it's like if you're escaping enslavement, even though
Yeah.
like that's the right thing to do because human
Yeah.
beings aren't meant to be enslaved, like it's quote unquote illegal. Like people definitely had to do what they had to do to be free, and so names would change, but that also like kind of interfere with the record keeping. Other times you would have sometimes there was things even with white people where just like the people who were doing the record keeping just spelled somebody's name wrong, and it's almost like after that like the family just spell the name that way. Like, you know, so there's all these like really and that's like the best case scenario of like people, you know, not living under the shadow of slavery, you know, but like
I mean, it was
it's so
kind of,
much more complicated.
let's imagine like World War II and the Holocaust. If the Jewish people had been through the Holocaust, and then the next generation was sold into labor and had another Holocaust. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's basically what happened generation after generation to Africans taken from Africa and made to work fields in the South of the United States.
Right.
I mean, they're just basically, they lost it all. And it's a tragedy, right? I mean, we don't know many stories like that. I mean, we've been around recording history for like 5,000 years, and there aren't many people that kind of just disappear from their roots,
Yeah.
really, right? That
Yeah.
we know of that are in history. So the good news is your narrative stays. You know, the African slave narrative stays. It doesn't disappear. It doesn't get erased like
Right.
a lot of narratives do. I mean, can you
But I'm
find
glad that
honor in
you,
it?
yeah, but I'm glad that you mentioned that, because I think that is where the Joel Christian Gills of the world are important, right?
Yeah.
Because yeah, like
They pull that
our
nuance. They pull
the
that thing that you don't think about. They
well, the
make you think
narrative
about that.
of us just being solely defined by slavery, and like, you know, even if you go back to like I mean, if I go back to my I was very frustrated as a kid with the way that Black history was covered when it was covered. And, you know, what I remember is, you know, when Black history was covered, it was covered badly in speaking about slavery. It wasn't covered well. And then they badly covered in a kind of incomplete manner, covered the civil rights movement, a, a very sanitized, palatable, you know, narrative of the civil rights movement that, you know, selectively focused on just a few individuals. um and you know, and that was kind of it, you know. And it's like there's so much to our history beyond that. And you know, I mean, I think for a lot of people, I know a lot of Black people that I know, I like, for instance, I saw 12 Years a Slave. I thought it was an excellent movie. But I know that there's a certain fatigue. I'm not speaking for everybody, but I know a lot of people, you know, of my generation and after my generation kind of have a certain amount of like, man, we've seen, you know, slavery narratives enough. Like, you know, and there's so many other stories to tell. Um, and
That brings me to the most important question. How does this guy impact your narratives? How is this Joel Christian Gill, how has he impacted you as a writer and as a graphic novelist?
I mean, I would say that I feel a kinship with what he's doing. And I think that what he's doing with this, you know, I'm pretty sure the very first time you and I spoke, it was kind of about like my artwork overall, like, you know, my comics, but also like,
Well,
you know,
that's how I got to
r-
know you originally, was through your artwork. You know,
right.
I
And
reached out to you because I appreciated what you were doing. I mean, you have gorgeous stuff. I love seeing your stuff.
yeah,
I
no,
mean,
thank
the
you.
thing that I'm looking at right now that keeps popping up when you talk, I mean, that's just beautiful stuff. I mean, it's not black art, it's just really good art.
Right.
And, you know, that's what I mean by all these narratives. They're just really good stories, right? They captivate something. And what did his narrative give you as an artist? I mean, what does he
Right.
provide?
Yeah, so I mean, to that end, I think that what I was gonna say is that like my art, and I say in my artist statement, a part of my artist statement is that um many of the things that I create are a representation of the beauty and diversity of the African diaspora, you
Yeah.
know. And that also, that I believe that art can be a powerful vehicle for change. And when I look at Joel Christian Gill's work, I think that that statement that I just, you know, said to you, like, that's it. That's what he's doing. You know, because not every
Awesome.
story in here is specifically about slavery. And it is, and when it is about slavery, it's just because it's kind of an inescapable part of our history. But I think what he's doing is really saying like, no, these people matter. Like, you know what I mean? And I'm not, and he's basically, I think it's very bold to say like, I'm not going to sit by while, you know, these people are relegated to the back burner, you know. and so I don't know. I think I identify it. I guess to answer your question, right? Like how does he impact the work I do? I think I find what he's doing reassuring to the part of my work that is also going in that direction. You know what I mean? Like I have so right now I'm working um on a couple comics that, don't address these themes as directly as like some of my other work, my paintings and in some of my drawings and other comics that I've done in the past. But like I have a ton of paintings and ideas in my head that I'm like I said, I'm going to really tackle in 2019 once I get through some of these projects. And the Joel Christian Gills of the world, I find them inspiring in the fact that, they're saying they have that mission. Like I relate to what he's doing. You know what I mean? Like with this narrative. And I think it's needed and it's necessary.
I think you're continuing it too in a way. I mean, he might be writing about history, but you're writing about the culture that you're in, the culture that I mean, you can't escape it, right? I mean, you write realistic stuff, don't you?
Yeah, I mean I do. I have I mean we've talked about this before, but I
I know
have
you keep promising me something, but it's never going to happen. Come on
no, it
now.
will. It will. No, I'm determined, and I'm not even going to. I can't even go too in depth about it
I
now,
know you
but
keep
like
teasing. It's the barbarian story, right?
I forgot about that. That
Oh, you're not even talking about the barbarian story?
no, but that I will have to do that though. I'm not letting that get lost either along the way. But no, but I do. There's it's just so many things I want to do, and
Right.
obviously, as a parent, it's like you have to a certain
I
extent.
wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning to do my writing, man. I can't do the parent thing and then the writing thing. I'm like exhausted otherwise.
Yeah, yeah.
So
So
I
it's
have to
kind of
find
like
that
your
time.
ideas sometimes are going at a quicker pace than your productivity. So I've really in the last 10 years since my daughter was born, really forced myself to do a few things really well as opposed to doing everything not as well. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So it's so
definitely.
these things will get done, but they're it
That's
I'm
cool.
just trying to do them well. You know?
What's coming up for you now? Anything that we can look forward to in terms of your output? Do you have
Yeah, like right now I'm finishing up the 59th of 60 pages that I have to illustrate for Cash and Carry, which is a all ages kid detective novel. I think we've spoken about it because I did
yeah.
a 20-page story in the first volume. Um so in this volume I'm doing 60 pages. It's like 3 chapters. So I the pencils are done for just about all the 60 pages, and then I have a lot of color work to do over the next month and a half. So that's my main focus. Then I'm going to finish Snow Days issue 2, and get that all wrapped up before the end of 2018. And then I'm gonna really get to some of these painting projects that have been kind of haunting me. Like, they've just been in my mind. And I'm actually pretty excited about that because um there's a grant that I'm going to be applying for. I'm doing the work either way, whether I get the grant or not. But um it's an artist grant, and I thought of a project that I really want to do. It's like a larger project that kind of combines my interest in painting and also my written and spoken um word work in one larger kind of multimedia. um
Well, that's interesting. Are you going to like YouTube it, or are you going to put it on a stage type deal?
what I want to do is what I envision is I've always been very interested in telling stories of like everyday people. Again, I guess there's kind of a connection with Joel Christian Gill. But and the series that I would really like to do would be in essence speaking to, interviewing, and like really getting to know um some people, and specifically like people who again are on the margins of of history, or however you want to describe it, and get to know what makes them them, just as a human being, and to create painted representations of them that would be portraits, like large portraits, but not just specifically like, hey, here's this person's face painted really well. It would be like portraits that also tell a bigger story, um maybe how that person sees themselves in opposition to how they're seen, things like that.
Mm,
And through the written work, I'd like to really take their words, you know what I mean, as they talk about their story, and um just to apply the lens of poetry to it, and have it be something that could be performed, alongside the visual work, and have
it's
it
very
be.
interesting. So you're making an original poem out of their words, their narrative that you can be interviewing
Yeah, but it's actually going to be
together.
very, very, very important to me that they approve of the poems. Like, I don't want it to be like, you know, I interview them, they tell me something, and then I interpret them in a way that's like wildly off base. You know what I mean? Like, um I want it to be something that truly like represents them and that they're comfortable with.
That's pretty
So,
cool, man. Have you ever applied for a grant before?
Um, I no, actually this is the first, and it came about very organically. I think this looser idea has been for this project has been in my head for years, but I happened to be at a meeting about this specific grant, um for just through my job, and I was like, oh, I should really pursue this, just on my own, as an individual artist.
That's
Um,
pretty cool, man. I don't know of any grants that I would even remotely look at. I think there's like a New York City writers grant that my wife wants me to apply for, but I never remember it when it
yeah.
pops up.
Well, I would say, like, look, number one, go for it, and also just Google, just see what's out there, because I think the thing that bothers me is like this grant that I'm going to apply for. It's yearly. It's right in my area, and so in essence, I was like, man, like I should have been,
Doing
applying
this
for
year
this
after
every
year.
year. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
But it's it's never too late, and it's
yeah.
good. And the same thing with my wife. She's an artist as well, so she's also like thinking about applying to grants, and I think that for creative people living in a society, right, where like artists, writers, and everything, oftentimes the value of that creativity is not always honored. It's like the few times where you have people who are saying like, hey, I see you, creative people, I want to help you achieve your vision. I think we should avail ourselves of those things. So basically, my lesson of the week is apply for as many grants as you can, because I feel like
Where do you go to find them? That's the
um
question, right? I mean, you look at one aggregate, and it doesn't. It's like three, and there's more than three grants in the entire world. So,
yeah, yeah.
yeah. So where do you find these dumb things at?
Yeah, they're out there. It would be
That's the
amazing.
thing, isn't it? With fate, I mean, it happens when it happens, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
you discovered this thing that you needed to be applying for the last 20 years or whatever,
right.
but you discovered it this year because it's your turn. If not this year, within the next 10 years, and that's a freaking awesome idea, dude. I was like picturing it
Yeah.
perfectly done with even you can do podcast. Just the portrait part of it probably take forever. I don't know how long it takes you to do a painting.
It takes a while, but
Yeah.
the grant is for 2019. So it's good
So do like
because
12 of them, or how many portraits would you be doing of the
I
people?
think it's going to depend on how it works out. I think I had the picture in my head of somewhere between 6 and 8. Because they will be large too.
Yeah, 6. That's like what, one every 2 months. That's I don't know. Is that doable? Like a big gigantic portrait in 2 months?
I've definitely like there's been obviously I've
Because I mean, you
been
don't
very.
paint just comic book stuff. I mean, you like your
Yeah.
stuff is like really detailed and
Yeah, yeah. And so I've been very productive in the comic book side of things for the last, I would say, 7 or 8 years, and
not
less
to say that
productive.
your comic book stuff isn't good because that's
No,
also
Yeah. No, I get what you're saying. No, I'm not at all insulted by that. But no, what I'm saying is, like I've gone through like creative stages where, like, some years I was very, very productive with painting, and some years I was very productive with writing. Sometimes, before becoming a dad, I was very productive with both at the same time. But like I said, I've had to focus more,
Yeah.
and I've gotten a little bit away from my painting productivity. Um, so I'm looking forward to, but when I'm in it, like I can knock out, like, eight large paintings in a year. You know what I mean? Like that's something that I'm comfortable with, that I've done. So yeah,
I
I
have
feel
a
good
friend
about it.
who does painting, and it boggles my mind the amount of resources that it takes to do a painting. I mean, you have to buy the paint, you have to buy the canvas,
Yeah.
and then if you make a mistake, I mean, it definitely impacts the rest of the life of that particular thing. I mean, the scars are there, the lumps of the paint. I don't think you ever heard of it. It's an
I
interesting
actually
medium.
like that though. It's interesting because I've had paintings that people have, like, said really positive things about, and I've, I'm very open about saying, like, yeah, there's layers on that painting. And when I definitely tell that to my students. I'm like, look, you might see a pretty painting, but like that artist has maybe,
Sees all the mistakes.
yeah, well, or they've painted over like a ton of mistakes that they made, and they just had the fortitude and the patience to see it through to where it needed to be.
Or
And
like me with one of my stories, I just give up. There you go. It's done. Whatever. You want to pay me, pay me. If not, I'll
right.
write another one. And maybe
Well,
that one will be good.
yeah, and that's the interesting thing is, like, there sometimes something does need to be done at a certain point, or any
Yeah.
of us as creative people could just do a
Go
project forever.
forever, man.
Yeah.
I talk to some people who do this world building thing, and that's what they do. They just do it.
Yeah.
Never ending world building. It's like, come on, dude, get off the pot here.
Yeah. Well,
So
it's no, you're absolutely right, because it's like, I don't know, as a creative person, you there's so many things that can be roadblocks. And, like, one of the things that people have said to me a lot is like, how do you get so much done? And sometimes it's because I'm like, I just have to do it. And it is important to outline things, it's important to sketch, to plan everything, but it's so easy to be perpetually stuck in planning. The curse of being stuck in planning is that you're like, well, I'm doing something, I'm working towards something, but it can go on so long that you're not really realizing your dream.
no, yeah, it's very true, man. I think if somebody asked me for advice, I would say just put your butt in a seat and make sure that that's the one thing that's making you feel the most guilt,
Yeah.
not doing it. You know what I mean? Just put the words down, put the pen down, put the brush down. I mean, just got to make those lines happen. Because man, and you'll agree. I bet you agree. The first 18 million lines suck, regardless. I mean, you're just gonna feel bad about yourself,
Yeah.
but you still have the lines done. You don't have to do them anymore. My wife has a great quote: "Every mistake that you fix is a mistake that you don't have to go back and fix again." So I mean, it's like every bit of forward momentum is you becoming better, getting
Yeah.
it done,
Yeah.
making something that didn't exist before, and potentially, inspiring somebody, because this guy inspired you, and you hopefully are going to inspire your students, and your students are going to inspire people that create art. I mean, you might not be the greatest artist of all time, but one of them maybe.
Right.
William Shakespeare wasn't the end. He was someplace in the middle, inspiring people left and right. Kenneth Branagh wouldn't be Kenneth Branagh without Shakespeare. We're talking about hundreds of years separating those people.
Yeah.
Two great artists.
Yeah.
Interesting. It's interesting how it works. I mean, the narrative, our human narrative. I think it's fascinating. I just
Yeah.
hope that the people who have closed minds don't win at the end of the day, because it does seem likely, right? I mean, there are a lot of cases around the world where people with closed minds are sitting on thrones.
But look at literature. Like, I think one of the things I find fascinating about storytelling and literature is, is the ways that obviously certain narrative themes come into and out of popularity over the years in certain eras, but then there's certain ones that seem to persist. And I think the idea of, human beings speaking truth to power, even under like dire circumstances, is an enduring one. Obviously, like something like, 1984 is an obvious example, but I think there's a lot of stories over the years where, um, you know, it's almost like I need to write, paint, tell these truths, like by any means, like despite what the possible consequences could be. And I think that there's a reason that those ideas endure, because I think there's something in us as human beings that, then at the end of the day, even in a society that's not free, there you can't totally kill the desire to be free in people. And freedom takes many shapes. It doesn't have to be physical bondage. It can be, like bondage of the mind, or just, lack of opportunity to move about, in society.
It's funny though, because the same things that bothered people 160 years ago aren't the same things that bother people today. I mean, the aches and pains are different. You know what I
Right.
mean? We're complaining about that still, which we can't do anything about because it flavors every day. You know what I
Right.
mean? And at the end of the day, just hopefully it becomes more than that. I mean, I don't know. Is there any honor in it? Can you pull any honor from it? I mean, what can we do? Because we're, countrymen at this time, at this point. I guess you're Jamaican though, are you? Are you American? I mean, how does that work?
Well, I'm an American. I'm
Oh, okay. You're
Black
just a
American.
Jamaican American.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, I've been here since I was a small child, so I'm proudly of Jamaican heritage, but I've spent way more time in the United States.
I mean, hopefully at the end of the day, it just stops mattering, but not at the same time because you know
Yeah, because
I
I
want Jamaican cuisine. I want Jamaican flavors. I want
yeah,
people to be Jamaican. I want to be an Italian American. I want to have Italian food. I want there to be flavors. I want
and
there to be
I'm
people
glad
that
you
look
brought that
different.
up. I'm glad you brought that up, because that was a point I was thinking of earlier, but I don't think we got to it. Is that even I don't look at some of these communities that came about of necessity as bad specifically.
No,
Like I think that it's
neither do
like
I.
I love being me. I love being black and being part of something larger. Um, it's funny. I always joke and say, and I think but it's not funny. But I think right now what we're seeing is like the manifestation of a weird type of envy that I never understood. A weird type of envy where, you know, not everybody, but a lot of white people, would see all of the stuff that, like, black people would speak about their experience, about, racism, about othering, and basically we're kind of like, "Nuh-uh, I'm I'm the one that's being where everybody's being racist," like, and I'm like, and I would always that always fascinated me, because I'm like, do you think we want this? Like, do you think we want to be, othered and on the lower end of the socioeconomic totem pole? It's like, no, it's not something we choose or we wanted. But now you're seeing like all of these people, because a lot is spoken about how, like, oh, like, Trump supporters are all poor white people, but they're not. Like, he had a lot of people who supported him who are
Women
uh
too. I mean, this
yeah,
is
who are making good money. They're not all poor, and it's kind of a misrepresentation to be like, oh. And also, even if there are a lot of poor people supporting him, they're voting against their own interests. This is
yeah,
a rapacious, a New York alleged billionaire. I mean, maybe millionaire. I don't think he's a billionaire.
mafia don at this point, man.
Right, right. But he's not
Oh,
somebody. He's not somebody that even would wipe his ass with some of these poorer people who he's supposed to be down
with them
for.
specifically.
Yeah, with
Being
with
held
with
down by his
actually with
bodyguard,
the
rubbing his ass on them. He
right.
wouldn't even do that.
Right. He would not do that. But so it's like, so it's interesting, but that sense of weird, victimization and need to be the one who's aggrieved has kind of manifested itself in the worst way that's basically screwed us all as a country, regardless of what your race is.
Has it? I wonder, because I was talking to my wife. That's like 3 times in a row. I know she's upstairs right now, so she's listening. Our babies are quiet, so they must be asleep. But what the hell was I going to talk about? God damn it! I distracted the hell
Well,
out of myself.
I'd said about how we're all screwed by this.
Oh, but it's interesting though, because I mean we're so screwed, but we're actually talking about the right things. We're talking about
Well,
universal
you
health.
and I are, but
Well,
there's a lot
that's
of
the
people.
narrative. I don't know. It's like the
There's
echo
a lot
chamber,
of people
right?
who are getting all of their information from Fox News, which is one of the scariest things I can think about. Like,
Just don't get it, man.
Fox News has been awful forever, but it's never been
But
embedded
it's
in the
not just
White
Fox
House
News.
in the way that it is. It's
It's
embedded.
not just Fox News. It's CNN too, and NBC or whatever have you. They're all horribly sensationalized. The
Well,
New York
okay, but
Times. I mean,
I hear what you're
occasionally you can
saying.
get germs of information, but I mean, it's like you have to pick. Like you
Right.
have to be a
Yes.
rational human being and say, that's bullshit. Oh, okay. Well, that's most of the shit on Fox
Okay.
News that was bullshit. I will give you that.
No. Yeah, but this is my point. This is my point, right? Like, I think you're speaking to a important, larger point about the the structural issues with the format of 24-hour cable news as it stands right now, right? There is an issue with it, but there's also a thing that goes on in our country where people like say like, oh, it's all bad, it's all this, and you know what I mean. And I think that even though like media like leaves a lot to be desired at times, it's not all the same. And I think that one of the biggest like lies that the devil ever told in the sense of Fox News is what they have managed to do successfully, sadly, is they've managed to be so extreme in one direction and
Yeah.
simultaneously paint everything that doesn't go to their extreme as being quote unquote the left-wing media or whatever, that like things that are just plain in the middle of the road are considered like super biased and awful, which is why you have, this blowhard president saying that the entire press is the enemy of the United States. And
Oh, man.
it's just not true. And I think that
I
like
do think there are good journalists out there. I do think that you can get good information,
yeah,
but I cut my cord so long ago. We don't have cable. We don't have any access to that stuff. We're completely on the internet.
right.
I'm not
but,
saying that's the best way to be, but what I'm saying is you look at information and you
but you
have to.
look at more than one source, don't you?
I mean, have to. I mean, you
That's
have
my
to.
point. That's my point. Can you imagine if you only got all of your information from one source? Imagine the power you are handing to that source. Not you, but you being the proverbial human being. Like if
Well, I
you
mean,
if
the other side of the shoe, the other side of the shoe. That's the wrong metaphor, but anyway, the idea is that they're probably not paying attention anyway. You know what I mean? Those people who are doing that aren't probably trying to learn. They're being entertained by the pretty pictures that are flowing in front of their faces. I
yeah,
mean,
but
it doesn't
also
matter what they learn.
but one of the things that like that sadly that Fox says, and this could be a whole episode in itself, one of the things that
Yeah.
sadly Fox has done is they tap into all of the fears and insecurities of America, oftentimes with dangerous results.
Mm.
So they know that like, there's a lot of, white people that feel insecure because there's the statistics about how by 2042, white people will be a majority minority. They will
Who
still be the
cares, all right?
majority.
My kids are Korean. They're half Korean. I mean, they're already like screwed based on that. I love my children. I love my wife, and I love my adopted culture too as well.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? I get to go eat
Yeah, and you
Korean
should.
food and know what the hell I'm doing, right? I mean, I think that's wonderful. When
Right.
I was a kid and that Time magazine article came out and the cover was that drop dead gorgeous girl and she was just a mix of various races. That's what I want. I want my tribe to be human, right? At the end of the day, that's what I want because it helps my children stop being different.
Yeah,
because I
you know,
don't want them
as
to be hurt.
long as we as the world manage to respect, you know, everyone who's visibly different. You know what I mean? Because like, I hear what you're saying. I think that's important, but I
I
think
don't even
that
know if they're going to be visibly different either. They're just going to be on paper visibly different. When they were born, this
well, you're
nurse
speaking
came
about
to
your
me and
family,
said, "You know, because the mom is Korean, they're
right?
Korean 100%." And I was like, "Okay, well, I don't care.
No, no,
Thank you for that
absolutely.
information, but I mean, I appreciate it. That
Right,
I
but you're speaking about a way in which you have evolved that doesn't always match how the world's evolved. I guess that's my only point. I
Well, I
think
didn't have a community, right? I mean, I just this color didn't apply to me. I had, dark skin, dark hair, dark eyes. I didn't fit into that thing. They didn't
Mhm.
want me there because I was different. But the other side of the ball, I had Italian people from New York that I hung out with. They were my family. They were the only people that kind of accepted me because I had dark hair and dark eyes. But when I told them my not my nom de plume my last name, they're like, no, you don't belong here either. So down the middle, I don't belong over here and I don't belong over here, but yet, I'm white. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
I don't have a home. I'm a military brat, so there's not even a community for me to look at. Um, what's my point?
Oh no, I think we were talking about, we were talking about, well, we had started talking about the fears that all these people have.
Yeah, they don't want to lose their culture, right? They want their family to succeed. They want to send their kids to wherever the hell their kids are going to make the most benefit and not suffer. Because at the end of the day, we're a Republican watching Fox News or we're a liberal reading stuff on Google News. We want our families to be successful.
Yeah,
We
but
don't want to hurt each other.
the difference is there's a lot of us, myself included. I want everybody's family to have opportunity,
Human family, right?
have the ability to thrive. And there's a lot, and a lot of the people who got us into this mess only want their own
The
to
Christian
thrive.
family or whatever it is, the white
Yeah.
Southern Baptist or whatever. Yeah, man, I feel that too.
It's very
It's
insular
unfortunate.
and
It has
yeah.
to be. And then I talked to the Robert Zabran. So I'm messing up his name. It's really embarrassing. Great scientific mind. Wrote the book A Case for Mars. Honored me with a 48-minute conversation. And within it, he said this thing. He's like, we concern ourselves with what if we run out when the universe around us has enough for us to live forever and not have to worry about not having if we're smart and we do it right. But instead, we steal people, the most finite thing that we have, life. We kill it and squash it and ruin its chance to flourish for the idea that if I give it to you, I might have it for myself. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The selfishness. And that's what it is, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
We gave all our jobs to China. But because the unions were so corrupted, we couldn't actually get a profit from our manufacturing plants. I mean, there was like this horrible collection of crap that has resulted in the condition of our country.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like, and again, I think that is where the idea of the press being the enemy of the people is so dangerous, because for all its failings, we need the press, and
We
we
need to
need
have we need the information, but we're not getting it
yeah.
because where is the information? Who has the information?
It's
I read a
definitely out
story.
there.
Is it an echo chamber story? Is it one that's actually giving me information that I can use to make good decisions, or is it
Yeah.
I mean, no, I'm sorry, that's not a good story to give me good information. It's going to skew my information. Instead of making wise decisions, I'm making stupid decisions.
Yeah.
I
Well,
want
what I
real
will
information.
say, is, I think for those of us who are, who are intellectually curious, and who, everything you're speaking about, those of us who don't want to just be led and want to look at something with our critical eye. There are people out there that are doing really good work, like, to that end. And it's not, as it's not hopeless. That's what I'm saying. It's not just like a matter of, everybody's like super biased one way or the other,
I mean, I don't think everybody who voted for Donald Trump is evil. I really do think they wanted a different system. I think they saw the
yeah.
system that we have not working, and They want it to work for you. They want it to work for me. They want it to work for them.
Right. But this is
And
where it's like good or evil is kind of irrelevant,
yeah,
because it's fine. I mean, but what I always say to that, right? Like you could say not everyone who voted for him is evil, or not everyone who voted for him is a quote unquote racist, but I can unequivocally say
he
they're
is.
okay. No, I can
Like, he's a
unequivocally
racist,
say
right?
those voters are okay with supporting someone who is
Yeah.
wildly racist, and
Yes.
they are
And a
um
womanizer and a
yeah, and
corrupt
they're
asshole. And
okay. Yep,
yeah,
and misogynist and every other type of bigot. They're okay with being a part of that. So you can say where like and you can apply that to anything. You can apply that
yeah,
to like to me as a guy. Like I might have my own ways that I'm marginalized, but if I turn around and I'm just being like horrible and saying horrible things like about women and everything, which I don't do, but if I did, then I would be subject to the same type of criticism, because it's kind of like we need to hold ourselves to some type of standard. So I think I get it.
ultimately, though, you grow, though, don't you? I bet you've said some stuff. You know what I mean? I know I have.
Oh
I've
yeah, I'm not
done some
look.
stuff.
I'm not at all trying to paint myself as someone
Right?
who came out of the womb perfect, and I'm not
We
perfect
have
right
to
now.
imagine that evolution is something that not just takes place genetically, it also takes place within the course of our lifetimes.
It
Because
takes
you're,
place in the course of our lifetimes if we're willing
if
to
you're willing.
evolve and we're willing to
And that takes
acknowledge.
pain, doesn't it? You have to strike your head on the countertop to know that you should probably look to see where you're aiming when you stand up. You
Yep.
know what I mean? But you have to still strike your head on the countertop. And unfortunately, now I don't know what's going to happen with the middle of this country. I've had visions, I've had ideas that I wanted to write out where you can't go through the middle of the country because it's violent and horrible. I mean,
Yeah.
these people, that scares me because they're willing to fight for
Hmm.
whatever the hell they believe, which is not good. Coal is not good. I can't believe in the State of the Union our president said clean coal. I mean, I feel like we're
Beautiful
getting
clean coal
trolled.
at that. Yeah.
Some stupid thing. I mean, God, man, I just feel like we're in a nightmare of stupidity, and it
We
doesn't make a lot of
are.
sense to me.
We are.
And I
Yeah.
know that he's not the one in charge. I know that somebody else is pulling the strings, and it may be Putin, and it may be some kind of, I don't know, Illuminati type situation. I'm not even sure. It just seems so ludicrous what's happening right now. It just doesn't make any sense to me.
It does. I think obviously Russia is it's not even a conspiracy theory at this point. I mean, I think it
Well, it's a
a lot.
conspiracy, right? But it's not
Yeah,
a theory.
but it's not, yeah, clearly, exactly. But like even beyond that, it doesn't even have to be an Illuminati thing. If you think about the fact that I think what we're seeing is all of the opiates of the masses, be it like the way
Church.
we use technology, the way
Yeah.
we use social media, the way that we numb our pain with reality television. And I'm not saying this as a judge. I'm not judging. I use social media. I mean, that's how you and I met, right?
Yeah.
But like so I'm not saying that like I'm above it all, but what I'm saying is I think that we're seeing the ways where the tools and the large corporate interests behind the tools, more importantly, start to lead us. You know what I mean? And I think that
Oh, I
um
definitely think that's happened, man. I think Facebook has their hooks on us.
yeah.
They've got rules set up. Now you can't post from this, that, and the other. You got to go there directly.
Yep.
They've got these new privacy things that are going through. They're being sat down in front of Congress, right? I mean, they're being
Yeah.
asked questions and being made to feel like prisoners in their future. You got to do the right thing, guy, and they're doing it, right? They're walking that line. They're
Yeah.
part of it. They're part of that corporate hierarchy or whatever it is.
Yeah.
I
And
mean, these aren't good people anymore. Google's not doing no evil. They're doing evil. they're
yeah, yeah.
they're
And this
they're stifling conversation. They're stifling creativity. They created this YouTube thing for people to put their own videos on and allow people to make their own decisions as to what they're being entertained with. And yet now there's an algorithm that shoves people down to the bottom and doesn't let them rise to the
mm,
top to be seen. I
yeah.
mean, they're silencing. They're
No,
violating
no.
our constitutional rights for free speech. They're making us have to, I don't know what, cable
Absolutely,
TV, right?
absolutely. Yeah. And it's like, I think we've spoken in some of our past discussions about Octavia Butler, and I know we spoke about Parable of the Sower, and one of the things that's frightening about that story is, number one, at the time it was written in the near future, which almost perfectly lines up with the year we're in right now. It's not exactly 2018. I can't remember if it's a little bit further or a little bit behind, but it's somewhere around where we're at. And in that book, it's they're living in a post-apocalyptic world, and the thing that brought about this place that the society is in is there was literally a just total blurring of the line of like corporate interest and politics, and I mean that's
My
how
God, man, 45, 49 years ago,
yeah,
right? Nixon did it to us. He did it in 68, 70, something like that, when he formed the DEA. I think he did that. I mean, we're talking about historic corruption that has done nothing but get worse over the course of my lifetime,
right.
to the point where I'm nullified, right? I have no hope for the future. And a lot of other people don't either. There's a lot of people that are done as human beings.
Read
All
some
they
James
have to do is
Baldwin.
let this die. Huh?
Read some James Baldwin. I don't know. Like
I don't
that's
know, man. I actually do want to feel good, though. I don't want to have this be my reality that's
yeah.
around us.
But
Unfortunately, I
and
want it
that's
to be
why I
different.
brought that up, because he said that really insightful thing about
No, no, about
optimism.
optimism. Hmm.
Yeah, and in his writing in general, I love it because he'll really speak about the ills of society, but he'll also be like, "Hey, this is the better world that we could be going towards," And I mean, like that could be a whole episode too about James
Yeah.
Baldwin, but he,
And we've talked for like 2 hours already. So, man, this has been, again, you are such a great person to talk to. I really thoroughly enjoy our conversations. Always amazing
oh yeah,
to actually get into it. I mean, there's so many avenues that we can pursue in terms of why we write, in terms of why we put stories and characters down on paper. I mean,
yeah.
that's why I wanted to do this show, is just to really dig into the artist's mind and figure out why they want to create.
Yeah, and I think I mean, I thoroughly enjoy these conversations as well, and I think society needs more of them. Clearly, I think everyone should pick up Uncelebrated Narratives of Black History, Strange Fruit, Volume 1 and 2, because you know there's a lot of stories that need to be told, and I think that everyone can learn from them.